That was one of the most frustrating things. There's still a few things wrong, but it's now working. I guess because I installed a new thing, I had to install Sprout again, but I think it's all working now, thankfully. Ugh. Although, ew, why does my audio mixer look like that? Ew, it looks ugly. It's too thin. It used to be that like the bars were thicker. Now they're ew. Anyway, let me just take like 2 minutes to collect myself because that sucked. That really sucked. Ah. Like I would have been streaming. I would have been streaming about an hour and a half even, if I had my way today. But no. I don't even know. Are things even working on my end? I assume they are. Okay, I can hear myself at least. On that. Wait, no, the ads are starting again. Damn you, Twitch. I had 40 minutes of ads. Now the ads are starting again. I don't want to deal. Look, I'm just gonna go. This is even one of those days where I'm almost like I don't even want to stream at this point. Like it's almost been too much of hassle. Too much of a hassle. It is fairly rough, I must say. It is fairly rough. It's just annoying. Although, maybe no, they're probably gonna run again anyway. I was about to say maybe because I already had the extra minutes of no pre-rolls, but those aren't pre-rolls. Those are mid-stream ads, so they're not gonna care. They're just gonna run away. Thank you, Stream Elements. Why does Stream Elements have a nose? Oh, that's the FFZ thing. Yeah, I enabled that. The Frankie face emotes or whatever they're called. Even though I never even use those, I'm gonna be honest, but I do see people use them from time to time. I don't know why its symbol is a nose though. But fair enough. Well, at least this is working. At least I can stream in my normal ways. I don't know what else could be broken. Who knows? Like, is it even going to? I assume everything else is fine. For some reason, profile is grayed out. I don't know what that's about. It could be bad. It could be fine. It could be terrible. We will never know, I suppose. But at least I am here. At least I'm here, and I hope everyone is having a nice weekend. In whatever manner that may be. I was looking forward to having things very much out of the way for Christmas. For the most part, I still had a little bit of work to do over Christmas, but now it's getting pushed back, so I have that to look forward to. Hello, Tallies. Welcome in. How you doing? I am doing my best to restrain the very, very angry portion of myself. Thank God that OBS actually closed and turned off the stream when it did, because when I turned it off the first time, when I realized that there were still issues, I got quite angry, and I said many things that would have made you guys blush in surprise. How could Ruadh say those words? It was mainly the just very angry. Oh God, I hope you're doing well. You okay? You're on break for your volunteer work? Ooh, what were you volunteering? On? Hope things get better for me. They at least seem to be better. Thank you, Tallies. Thank you. Very sweet. Very sweet. More on the modern age. Yes, the modern age of OBS not doing what I tell it to do. You volunteer at a Saint Vincent de Paul charity on Saturday. That's really cool. That's really cool. I hope you regularly get to do um the best of things. And thank you, Clever, for the head pad as well. And the hydrate is my bottle of water. Hang on a moment. I actually need to for Christmas to go through my wardrobe. That I have in another tree. You guys can't see it. Behind you guys is a tree where I keep all of my like clothing. Very fashionable clothing. But I need to go through it and just kind of see, what things am I not really wearing anymore. Not things that are like falling apart. That's not good enough. But things that like big heavy jumpers and things that would be good for Christmas or would be good for the winter. I tend to find that like for Ireland, it tends to be December, January, and February that are the coldest months. Maybe not February, but definitely like January tends to get very cold. On the topic of blushing, you only saw the art in the Not Safe for Work channel last night. Ah, yes, that was done by my. That was. I spoke about that in the last stream, but that was done by a friend called Auxilia Genome. It was sort of like this project that he does, I think every year, where he does Not Safe for Work art. He did a very nice one of me, I must say, needing a bath of some kind. There is another one in the works. In your state, it's definitely January. It's probably a good thing then that Christmas can be. I imagine sometimes though, Tallies, it can be very annoying. If you guys do get like clothing and things, I assume that's probably what you guys do as a charity. Maybe give out clothing, give out food. Wait, am I thinking of the same charity? The Paul. Yeah, usually it's like the same kind of stuff. Yeah. That you sometimes have to sort through those that are just rags and like people were just like, oh, this is like falling apart, so I may as well toss it in. Of course, like there's a lot of stuff that you can probably repair from that. Like, if there was like, oh, there's a hole in here, but we can just sew this up and suddenly it's a perfectly good thing. You work in literature? I'm not surprised you work in literature. If you guys are wondering what those facial expressions were, that was me stuck in a yawn. I was stuck in it for about 3 seconds. But yeah, Genome does that once a month, or not once a month, like every month, every year. And one of my friends suggested I do it, so I decided to do it too. I will say there's a much spicier one coming down the pipeline. Pretty soon, made by my fellow Chuba and goblin friend Toete Goblin, technically. Well, I think it's like Toete Shears or something. I don't know. Toete Goblin. Much spite, yes. Yeah. Effectively, it's just removing that towel. And Toeti is a fantastic artist, I will say. Very, very good artist on anatomy. So everyone will enjoy, I'm sure. I needed to just relax. Ayo. I suppose it is Ayo worthy. Oh wait, hang on. I grabbed my bottle of water, but I never actually hydrated. Hang on. I had a cup of tea before stream, so I am somewhat hydrated. So I might just get straight into the book reading stream because I was meant to already be an hour in, and that didn't happen. So I'm just gonna get stuck into it straight away. When last we finished off, we Fox. No. Yeah. Thank you for the Facebook box. What tea do I like? What tea do I like? I'm going to be. I have drank like is it community? No, it's like Camilla tea. I have drank like various teas before. I remember there was a really nice jasmine one. There was wait, jasmine? No. But in Ireland, there are two types of teas. There's Lions and there's Barry's tea, and they're both black tea. And you better pick one. You better pick one to support because people form opinions on that. There's of course like all the other types of tea, but like I think it's the same in the UK as in Ireland. It's like, you know, there is black tea. Although there is tea. There is tea. It is the version that is black. I believe I talked about this before, that I never realized that like Lions or Barry's is called black tea, because to me it's always just been tea. Like I've always heard, oh, green tea, fucking red tea, whatever, all these different types of teas. And then to me it was like, oh, there's just tea. There's just normal tea. It took a while for it to click that was a specific kind of tea. Obviously, I must have known somewhere in the back of my mind that, hey, yeah, that's the type of tea. But it was always just like, yeah, it is the tea. I'm dumb. You're a big tea lover. I remember one time I was at this event in a nice hotel. We were being not put up there, but like the event was on in the hotel for the whole day. And we were sitting down at tables, and then they brought down the tea. Yes, the tea, the very tea. And they brought in loads of they brought in tea and coffee and cakes and all that type of stuff. But then they brought in the normal black tea. And then there was also all the different kinds of teas. I remember having them, and they were really nice. I was like, I decided to try one of them. I can't even remember what it was, but whatever they were anyway, they were really nice, and there was loads of different flavors. So I ended up a lot of them weren't used at the end of the day. Like most people just stuck with coffee or normal tea. So I just kind of walked up, I got my tea, and I grabbed like 2 full handfuls of them and walked away and put them into my bag. And I was very happy with myself. They lasted me at least a month. Now I don't no, actually no, you know what? No, I was drinking 1 or 2 of those a day. No, I was probably drinking 1 of those a day, but then I was having normal tea on top of it. So I mean, yeah, I grabbed a lot of them. But hey, if they put it out, then they must be willing to lose it. Hello, Emma. How are you doing? Welcome in. As is right and just. Exactly. They put it out for people to take. People didn't use them, but I wanted to use them over the next couple of days and weeks. So I took them. Hablo español? No. No. No hablo español. I don't. Is that what you say? I think that's what you say. I do not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Emma. What does that mean? Clever, be nice. If that is a bad word. You just say things. See, that's why when I say English streamer means a bit. Ah, I see. It's probably like a slur. Estudio español para 2 años. Why does everyone know Espanol? No Spanish. Latin Americana. Well, no, hang on. I feel like I could guess what Latin Americana means. I feel like if I didn't know what that meant, there'd be more. Okay. Que parte? I can guess that. I can also guess that. Peru. Very cool. I'm understanding through vague similarities and the same words. Que interesante. Is that how you pronounce it? If I was to learn Spanish, I'm pretty sure I would learn the. I would learn. I would end up learning the. What's it called? Do 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 do. Like, well, say, like the Spanish version, like the Spain way of speaking, which I think has a bit more of a not a lisp, but it has a very strong S. I assume anyway, because that would be the nearest area for me. But I think this topic does have an effect on Latin America. Hmm, maybe. But I think I will get into the reading today. I might be able to do maybe 10 pages. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see how long. Your teacher was a Spaniard? Ooh, very nice. They're good people. They're nice people. You know, there's some belief that one, the idea of the Black Irish, those being Irish were kind of, I don't even want to say swartier skin, just kind of like maybe a slightly darker complexion. But like I mean, Irish people in general are quite pale, quite white, um, quite fair skinned in general. So like, and then like the black hair. Some think that those features come from Spain, come from northern Spain, because there's stories that the Gaels came out of the Milesians and they sailed into Ireland, and they were kind of the original inhabitants, or at least the original Gaels. So it's interesting. Uh, yes, so we're going into chapter 2, Petrarch and the Invention of Individuality. And we kind of left off. I won't cover it too in depth because the last couple of chapters, my presentation and the last chapter really went in depth into these topics. So I think we will just immediately go into the chapter. Basically, again, we're looking now at the kind of one of the key figures in this nominalist versus realist debate. Is my okay? There we go. I'm just making sure that my volume is okay. Bring it a little bit closer. There we go. I think. Hmm. Okay. On a beautiful day in 399 BC, one of the most clear-minded human beings who ever lived chose to die rather than go into exile from his native city. This man was, of course, Socrates. Why he finally came to this decision we will never know, but apparently occurred at some point after the deliberate phase of his trial had concluded and before the determination of his sentence. He was standing with his friend in the agora, the marketplace where he had spent his life, pestering his fellow citizens and philosophizing with his friends and followers. Towering above him was the Acropolis and the temples to the gods, whose nature, if not existence, he had called into question. Great Athena herself, emblazoned with gold, holding her great spear and gleaming in the brilliant Attic sunlight, stared down at him unspeakingly. He knew the vote would be close, and he almost certainly hoped that the majority of the 500 jurors would vote in his favor. But if not, he would have to propose a punishment, and his accusers would certainly demand his death. He knew that most of the jurors would prefer simply to be rid of him if he were convicted. He could thus choose to go into exile and live elsewhere with some of his friends, but this was apparently unacceptable to him. We do not know why he rejected this possibility, but it led directly to his death. From the later accounts of his friends and followers, we know that they believed he had concluded that he could not be the same person anywhere else, that his identity in a decisive way was bound up with Athens. You remember hearing about Spanish soldiers settling in Ireland after Jacobite wars? There's various examples of this. So some of them say that, like, okay, the Black Irish thing, or those kind of darker complexion features, well, say, the initial inhabitants of Ireland being the Gaels. There's some theories, but I don't believe it's correct, that the The Spanish Armada that was meant to, well, at least Navy fleet, that was meant to land and assist Ireland on multiple occasions. They attempted multiple times. And I think they landed once, and then the Battle of Kinsale happened in the nine years war, and everything went to shit. I believe they got held up somewhere, and the great Hugh O'Neill, well, near Kinsale, and the great Hugh O'Neill went to try and relieve them, and even though they outnumbered the English, as things sometimes happens, things just went against them, and everything crumbled. Everything crumbled apart, and it was very, very sad. But some say that it was the survivors of those Spanish soldiers. That could have been like during the Jacobite Wars, maybe. But no, I don't think so. I think that was a different time. Socrates' choice came to exemplify the essentially political character of being human. As Aristotle later argued, to be human is to be a zone logon action, literally life that has speech, or as it was later translated, a rational animal. Speech, however, only exists in community with others. Therefore, to be a rational animal, one must also be a zone politikon, a political animal. Those who live outside the city, in Aristotle's view, are thus either beasts or gods, and even the most autarkic human being, the philosopher, is not capable of such an extra-political existence. This vision of human identity as essentially political was called into question by later Stoic philosophers, who insisted that the wise man was not a citizen but of a particular city, but of the cosmos, that he participated not merely of the logos of one city, but in the divine logos that had coursed through all things. It was never clear to them, however, that anyone could, other than perhaps Socrates, had ever attained such independence, and even he, of course, had chosen not to follow such a path. Moreover, in their account, the supremely wise man is not beyond the city in the larger sense of the term, for the cosmos itself, in their view, is a titanic city with natural laws of its own. The Stoic wise man is thus not a political, but a cosmopolitical, not an independent individual, but a citizen of the cosmic city. Christianity also posed a challenge to the hegemonic role in the political, in this constitution of identity in the ancient world. However, while Christians rejected citizenship in the cities of pagans, they did so only because they imagined themselves to be a citizen of a higher and more exalted city, the city of God. They thus gathered together in small and large communities in this world to worship God, always living in anticipation of his return and the transformation of the entire world into one righteous city ruled over by God himself. This eschatological vision animated ancient Christians from Paul to Augustine and continued to exercise a powerful influence down to the time of Dante in 1265 to 1321. Nearly 1,000 years later. Exiled from his beloved Florence by internecine political conflict, he spent the last 2 decades of his life constructing in his imagination the world to come, a final city, with a divinely ordained place for the blessed, the damned, and everyone in between. The transition into the modern world began with the rejection of this political, cosmological, and theological vision of human identity. In part, this is rooted in the nominalist rejection of the orderly cosmos and the orderly God portrayed by scholasticism. As we have seen, according to the nominalists, there is no divine logos or reason that can serve as the foundation for a political, cosmopolitan, or theological identity. Moreover, the idea that an ordainedly political and theological world, in which Dante and his predecessors grew up, was falling into pieces. Citizens of the kingdom of heaven. I actually have Augustine's City of God on my shelf. I need to read it someday, but if I remember correctly, it's one of the biggest books on my shelf, so we'll see about reading it all the way through. The struggles between the Pope and the Emperor, between the forces of localism and nationalism, and between town and country were a reflection of the disintegration of medieval life that had begun with the failure of the Crusades. How would it be possible to find a ground for identity in a world in which God, man, and nature were all in motion, all incomprehensible, and all at war with one another? The first to face this question attempted to answer it was Francesco Petrarch, 1304 to 74, who looked not to city, God, or the cosmos to support, but into himself, finding an island of stability and hope, not in citizenship, but in human individuality. Petrarch grew up in a world that was shaped by the collapse of an idea of political and cultural order that had sustained Europe for centuries. Although only 40 years younger than Dante, he was separated from him and the entire tradition stretching back to Socrates by a gulf that is immediately evident at the beginning of his autobiographical Familiar Letters. It's so good, even if you aren't Catholic. It's well worth it. Augustine knows how to write. I will. I definitely would like to read it someday. I probably wouldn't do it as a stream. I think I'd read it on my own time when I do have time. Ugh. It's a struggle to find. Although now that I have so much free time because I am now off for a long time, at least for the month of December, I could definitely find time to maybe do that. Maybe. But it's definitely one of the works that I've heard, mentioned as one of the other great works of Christianity, alongside, Thomas Aquinas from a what would you call it, philosophical and theological perspective. Much too long for a stream, yeah. I mean, this book is 300 pages. It's fairly dense, but that I don't know. Like, I don't even know where to start with that one. That would take so long. A man without a home, driven continuously about in the world, prey to fortune, and surrounded by a perplexing multitude of human beings, Petrarch struggled to find some connection to others that would provide stability in his life. In his earlier years, his friends seem to have played this role. Unfortunately, friendship proved inadequate, for in 1348 the Black Death arrived, and, quote, all these friends in no time at all were destroyed in almost one stroke. The consequences were awesome. The year 1348, quote, left us helpless and alone. It subjugated us to irreparable losses. In the face of these difficulties, Petrarch neither turned to religion nor succumbed to despair. Quote, in fact, I have become stronger out of that very state of despair. After all, what can frighten someone who has struggled with death so many times? In the midst of these troubles, without a home, his friends ripped away from him. He found a new way of life that gave him such strength that he was convinced that, quote, I shall never succumb to anything further. If the world slips into destruction, the crumbling ruins will find me fearless. Beyond the community and beyond religion, amidst war and collapse and destruction, Petrarch discovered a new foundation for human life, a foundation which was to become the modern age. This chapter examines the very beginnings of modernity and Petrarch's conception of individuality. Petrarch's thought is a response to the crisis of the late medieval age. He finds an answer to this crisis, in a vision of man as a finite individual, capable of self-mastery and self-perfection. However, for Petrarch, such self-mastery is only possible outside of political life. At its foundations, the modern notion of the individual, and thus the modern age, is intensely private and apolitical. You'd put St. Anselm's Proslogion? Is that, how do you pronounce that? Up there too. I have heard of St. Anselm. That's the issue. You always read these names. Anselm, I'm pretty sure. But sometimes you just don't hear them said. That was far more influential than people often realize. I'll have to look into it then. The consequences were awesome. Clearly they're using it in the sense of like awing, I know people use awesome as a good thing, but awesome can also just mean, awe-inspiring, overwhelming. Proslogion? Wait, no, is that G? Is that a soft G? Wait, no. What's like G or Yi? Proslogion. J or hard G. Petrarch's life. Petrarch's father. I get you. Wait, no, is it J? Proslogion. Okay. Oh, cool. I will look that up later. Maybe tomorrow. We'll see. As in green. I get you. I get you. Petrarch's father, grandfather, and great grandfather were all Florentine notaries. Like Dante, his father was forced to leave the city as a result of political conflict. He went first to Pisa and then 1312 to Avignon, where he obtained work at the papal court. Petrarch was brought up in the Carpentras, a small town near Avignon. As a boy, he studied grammar and rhetoric, and like his father, demonstrated great enthusiasm for Cicero. In 1316, at the age of 12, he was sent to study law at Montpellier, where he remained until 1320, where he went with his younger brother, Gherardo, to continue his studies in the University of Bologna. During this time, he broadened his knowledge of Cicero and Virgil, as well as the other traditional authors within the legal curriculum. He also came into contact with those writing vernacular poetry, and began his lifelong study of Augustine. With the death of his father, he and his brother returned to Avignon early in 1326. There's quite a few notes here. Let me do a quick skim through. Was there anything important here? Not that I can see yet. This was a tumultuous year in the papal city, which was the intellectual centre of the Christian world. Pope John the 22nd was in the midst of his struggle with the Franciscans over the question of poverty. As we saw in the last chapter, Michael of Cesena and William of Ockham defended the Franciscan position. The conflict that grew increasingly heated pitted the Pope and the Curia against the most popular and fastest growing spiritual order in the Church on an issue that cut to the heart not only of the meaning of Christianity, but to the question of the appropriate manner of life for the clergy. While there is no direct evidence that the young Petrarch followed this debate, it is hard to believe that he was not reasonably well acquainted with the positions of both parties. He was on friendly terms with the powerful Colonna family, who exercised great power within the Curia during this period. We also know from his later recollections that he was immersed in the intellectual life of Avignon at that time. It thus seems likely that Petrarch was well acquainted with this debate. Whatever the impact this dispute and the anomalous position that Occam defended had upon Petrarch's view of the world, it was all soon superseded by the single event of Petrarch's life. His encounter in 1327 with a young woman with whom he fell immediately in love. As his affection was not returned, his love was both hopeless and tragic. His entire lyric outpouring was occasioned by his love for this woman, who he called Laura in his poems. Her subsequent death during the plague did little to settle his soul, and he struggled throughout his life to master the passion. And there's a note here. Questions have been raised about the identity and even the reality of Laura since Petrarch's own time. Some have noted the striking parallel between Dante's account of his falling in love with Beatrice and Petrarch's attachment to Laura, and have speculated that she was more likely a literary trope than a real person. The close connection of the name Laura to Laurel and the Laurel Crown, or Laurel and the Laurel Crown, with which Petrarch by his own account was crowned, have led others to believe that it was not a real person, but rather fame that Petrarch fell in love with. Others have seen a hidden Christian symbolism in the name Laura, since the cross was supposedly constructed out of laurel. There can be no definitive answer to this question, since almost all knowledge of Petrarch's life is derived from the various collections of his letters he put together late in life. From his own testimony, we know that he reworked many of those, and from a scholarly detective work, we know some were simply invented. In my view, the status of the letters should not disqualify them. They should be treated in the way all autobiographical material is treated, with skepticism and detail, but with a general trust that the author is not inventing himself out of the whole cloth. Many of these letters appeared while the persons involved were still alive, and there is little conflicting testimony about their veracity. Having run through his inheritance, Petrarch found himself in need of money and decided to pursue a clerical career, taking up minor orders and entering the service of Cardinal Colonna in 1330. There's a note. Petrarch served mostly in a secretarial capacity and never accepted a position that involved pastoral duties. Petrarch's brother, by contrast, continued to lead a secular and rather dissipated life until 1343 when, much to Petrarch's surprise, he entered a Carthusian monastery. Colonna was more a patron than an employer and allowed Petrarch considerable time for travelling, book collecting, reading, and especially writing. This guy is like getting patroned to just read and write. Wait a minute. I have subscribers who do the same. I am literally Petrarch. He's literally me, guys. He's literally me. Well, I get paid to read. I get the odd couple of subs, which I'm always very grateful for. Man, imagine your whole life just being like, hey, go read and write and bring me interesting things. He remained nominally in Colonna's service until 1347, although during this period he travelled a great deal and spent much of his time in a small house he had purchased in a beautiful valley not far from Avignon, known as the Vaucluse. After leaving Colonna's service, Petrarch derived support from the various benefices he had obtained over the years and from several other patrons, including the infamous Visconti, a family of Milanese tyrants. He lived chiefly in Parma, Milan, Padua, and Venice. His literary production was voluminous, although due to his habit of repeated revision, it was not all published during his lifetime. Early in his service to Cardinal Colonna, he produced the first scholarly edition of Livy. A series of important works followed, his great collection of lyric poems, generally known as the Psalm Book, the Canzoniere, a collection of exemplary lives entitled Illustrative Lives, De Viris Illustribus, an epic poem on Scipio Africanus's triumph over Hannibal called Africa, an intensely introspective and self-critical dialogue between himself and Augustine called My Secret, Secretum Meum. Interesting. So I believe in... Doesn't St. Augustine, he has the Confessions, where he basically sort of has a dialogue between himself and God. I think it works out something like that, isn't it? So this time he's doing it the other way around. A great work extolling the private life over the public, called On the Solitary Life, De Vita Solitaria. And his most popular work, Remedies for Fortune Fair and Foul, De Remedies Utriusque Fortunae, which was widely read throughout Europe for well over 300 years. In addition, on the model of Cicero's quasi-autobiographical letters to Atticus, Petrarch published 4 different collections of his letters, including a number of letters to ancient authors. He received the Laurel Crown for poetry in Rome in 1341, and was compared favourably both while alive and after his death to Cicero and Virgil. I mean, now we have the Alright, Ruadh, you have to go back to work. Hopefully you'll see me around when you're done. Hopefully, Tallies. I'm glad you could join. I always enjoy having you here. Even if it's just throwing in the odd comment here and there, or even just knowing that you're listening. That someone who is much more like actually learned on this stuff. Well, on maybe the broader stuff than I am. It's good to have. But I hope you have a nice time at work. Oh yeah, I was gonna say we have the Nobel Prize. Did they give out laurel crowns? I feel like they should start giving out laurel crowns again. While Petrarch's literary production had a profound impact upon his contemporaries and successors, his lifelong attempt to resurrect and popularize the great literary and philosophical works of the ancient world was equally important to the humanist enterprise and to the Renaissance itself. By the time of his death, Petrarch possessed the largest private library in Europe, and it was this collection that served as the foundation for the Studia Humanitatis. Petrarch was also a lifelong supporter not merely of the resurrection of Roman literature, but of the institution of the Roman state and the return of the papacy to Rome. He supported the attempts of Cola de Rienzo to revive the Roman Republic, and when this effort failed, he repeatedly sought to convince the emperors Ludwig IV and Charles IV to return to Rome. He had urged a series of popes to re-establish the papacy in Rome, Because of his intellectual standing, he also served on a number of diplomatic missions aimed at mediating between warring states in keeping with his larger goal of Italian reunification and elimination of foreign intervention in Italian affairs. Already by 1340 he had become the most famous private man in Europe, and was sought after by popes, emperors, and various princes and tyrants. Petrarch, however, was determined to maintain his freedom and privacy, declining all offers of courtly life. In this way, he set the model for the independent intellectual life that became central to the humanist tradition that continues to play an important role today. Let's take a quick look, see if there's any further notes here to pay attention to. There's one. Other works were of course later discovered and added to this corpus, especially the works of Greek poets and philosophers, who were only poorly known by Petrarch, but many of the classical works that we still consider more important were first resurrected by him. So it's not Pelagianism, right? I think there were suggestions of Pelagianism against many of the nominalists. But I think many of the nominalists, and especially Occam, for example, would have... Excuse me. That was a weird yawn. That was more me just making noises. That they would have focused on the supreme power of God. So even the creative power and the willing of humans to do things would not have overridden the divine will of God. So there's no way they would have been able to. If I remember correctly, yeah, Pelagianism is the belief that mankind can kind of like can save itself, isn't it? That it can. I'm pretty sure that's the one. Essential goodness and freedom of human will. Yeah. The humanists weren't. I mean, I imagine they start going down that bend, and then maybe they develop into their own thing. But I mean, we'll get into it, I suppose. Petrarch's view of the world and the human condition. Petrarch's remark at the beginning of the second volume of the Remedies that there was nothing more deeply imprinted in his mind than Heraclitus's saying that everything exists by strife. Everything, he continues, attests to this. For, quote, Mother Nature has created nothing without strife and hatred. Petrarch sees continual change everywhere, beginning with inanimate things and extending through the entire spiritual sphere. War, he asserts, is universal. From the firstmost of the angels to the smallest and least of the worms, the battle is unceasing and endless. Human life is particularly beset by strife. One cause of this lies in the nature of things. According to Petrarch, but far greater is the war that takes place within our souls. It is thus not only nature or fortune that threatens man, but man himself. In the first instance, this is the result of the struggle for preeminence that characterizes human life. It is driven by a desire for fame and the contrary workings of envy and resentment. As a result, the affairs of men never stand still, and the one who sits highest on the slippery wheel is closest to his downfall. Indeed, quote, no power on this earth is stable, for war hides under the guise of peace. And even in times of peace, we are still beset by our own passions, by invisible masters in our mind, born of a hidden poison that lurks in the very origin of man. The companions of peace are thus license and lust. In order to attain and maintain his freedom, man thus must forever battle temptation. So there was loads of quotes there. Loads of various quotes, much of it from the Remedies, but I thought it would ruin the flow if I said, quote, unquote, quote. The wheel here is the Wheel of Fortune, a widely used medieval and Renaissance image. In 1352, Laertes Stefano Colonna surveys the world and finds such promise of peace and freedom only in Venice and Paris. Is there anything else to keep an eye on for? 42, I would say. 35, maybe, yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking at the notes. Petrarch was convinced that the religious institutions of his time were not only incapable of resolving this problem, but actually exacerbated it. The church hierarchy, in his view, was corrupt. He reproved the notoriously greedy Cardinal Annibaldo, on one occasion suggesting that it was important for the church to possess gold, but not be possessed by it. In Petrarch's view, this corruption was due in part to the subjection of Rome to Avignon and the French, but it was also the manifestation of a deeper spiritual failure that lay at the heart of medieval Christianity. Petrarch believed that European history fell into 4 periods. The first 2 periods were guided by reason. The first of these was dominated by Platonic metaphysics, and the second by the moral wisdom of Seneca and the Stoics. In both of these, reason aided human virtue. The third period, which began with the Incarnation and ended in the 5th century, was supernaturally guided. The fourth period, which drew on Aristotle's attack on Plato, was dominated by scholasticism and Averroism in particular. So remember, that's specifically Averroes from the Islamic thinkers. Reason rather than revelation guided human life in this period as well, but in this case it served to undermine rather than promote virtue. Petrarch was dissatisfied with both realist scholasticism and nominalism, but for different reasons. He was unequivocal in his attack on Averroism, which he considered the most extreme form of realism. The most basic principle of Averroism places the intellect above every form of individuation, considering it not as divided but as a unity. It is thus not the individual itself, but being that is the object of thought. Petrarch, like the nominalists, saw this position as heretical. Like the nominalists, he also thought that realist scholasticism was lost in Aristotelian categories, and thus did not encounter the ultimate reality of individual things. While he may have agreed with the nominalists on these matters, he detested their dialectical approach, which seemed to him too often to be a mere fighting with words with little concern for truth. Here he was particularly irritated with the Britanni, among whom he apparently included Scotus, Occam, and their followers. Like many of his time, he was fed up with what seemed to be an interminable squabbling about matters distant from reality and terminology that was impossible to understand. Theology, he felt, was becoming increasingly distant from piety, and with its abstract language and technical terms, it had moved as far beyond as possible from anything that might actually persuade or inspire ordinary human beings. Sorry, I'm going to turn down the volume again a little bit. It's hard to balance that. Petrarch's relations with the Franciscans was also ambivalent. He discussed Francis of Assisi in The Solitary Life, although only briefly, and while he seemed to have admired the general goals of that order, he vacillated between a view that their austerity was overly severe, and his suspicion that it was often insincere. Moreover, it is doubtful that Petrarch wished to see all Christians living according to Franciscan standards. In The Solitary Life, Petrarch praises the religiosity of Francis and the other ascetics, but finds their lives barbarous and inhuman. They may avoid corruption, but they do so only by lurching to the opposite extreme. In Petrarch's view, the life of excess could not be cured by a life of deprivation. A middle way was necessary, and he believed that this was the life of virtue. According to Petrarch, only virtue can make us victorious in our never-ending war with fortune. Fortune batters us continually with its 2 weapons, prosperity and adversity, and the wounds these weapons inflict are the passions or effects. Struck by the passions, we cease to be masters of ourselves, and are pulled this way and that. Humans can avoid this fate only by early training and habituation. Such a system of training characterized the Roman world, and gave it its great strength and nobility. In his own corrupt times, Petrarch believed the institutions of education and training actually exacerbated the problem. He thus felt that the only way to bring about moral reform was to transform human values. For the fallenness of his time was not a political problem, but a cultural one. He hoped to persuade the aristocracy to honor not wealth and luxury, but virtue and wisdom, and they in turn would serve as models for the rest of humanity. Such a change Petrarch would acquire a thorough reformation of culture. Petrarch's immediate task, as he understood it, was thus to bring about such a reformation by laying out a more noble and beautiful vision of the good life. A few notes here. For example, Petrarch lived in the Franciscan monastery of San Lorenzo and was shocked by the political authority exercised in the city by the Franciscan spiritual Roberto de Melito, a member of the Brethren of the Life of Poverty, who was at odds with other Franciscans and the Pope. Petrarch thought he was a hypocrite. Fortune is not an independent force for Petrarch, but a manner of speaking about the basic human condition in a world of strife and change. Petrarch's project, from beginning to end, was thus cultural renewal. The means to such a renewal, however, was not given or fixed. Petrarch believed that in all ages humans are capable of attaining a high level of culture and virtue, but that they could do so only if they received appropriate nourishment. Unfortunately, for the last 1,000 years, they have been starved. Petrarch felt that the first step in remedying this problem was to make clear what a virtuous life was, and then convince his fellow human beings in its beauty and nobility. To answer this question and provide convincing images of such a life, he returned to the ancients. Petrarch was thus not interested simply in imitating antiquity, but in improving human beings. He looked to the ancients and hoped to restore the great position that culture had enjoyed in Rome, but only because he was convinced that this was the only way to produce virtue in a world of continual strife and change. Petrarch's project had a political component, but was not essentially political. Political life, as he understood it, was a means to morality and not an end in itself. He recognized the importance of political support for culture, but put culture finally above the state. Moreover, Petrarch, for reasons that we will examine below, had sincere doubts that cultural and moral standards could be set by the community. He imagined a world for which human beings were held together not by political bonds, but by the voluntary bonds of friendship. I was seeing, slight bit of contractarianism coming in, social contract. The community imagined was thus to be more a fellowship of private men in friendly intercourse with one another, communicating through speech, letters, books, than a republic or principality. So not really, but, you can start to see possibly where that could also come in. If you take that view and you twist it a little bit, you get into Hobbes. Petrarch was convinced by his encounter with scholasticism that morality could not merely rest on true knowledge. Human beings had to will moral action. Humans thus had to have a moral purpose and want to attain it. Thinking in this sense is the purest of the good. The moral problems that thought confronts in the world that is characterized by strife rather than order, however, is that there are no natural ends for humans to pursue. Here Petrarch shares the nominalist premise that there are no substantive forms, no real species, and thus no natural ends, so no teleology in the world. In order to understand what ends I ought to pursue, it is thus necessary for me to understand what I am. For I am not just another member of the human species who has certain essential defining characteristics and a certain set of moral duties, but an absolute particular, an individual created immediately and uniquely by God. To understand what I ought to do, I thus have to understand what I am in, and for myself. For Petrarch, all moral questions thus go back to self-knowledge, and all human history is a study of human biography. I caught a glimpse of the face hole. Thank you, Fox. Very appreciated. I love the face hole. People should do it more. People always poke me in the face. They always poke me in the face. How dare they? And then they hold my face and I get all happy and I lean into it. I snuggle into it. Because that's how you should do it. No, clever. How dare you? You've betrayed me, my friend. It's so over. It's so over. Love and virtue. This new vision of the individual first begins to emerge in the context of Petrarch's lyric poetry. The story of Petrarch's poetry is the story of his struggle to overcome love, to free himself from the tyranny of the passion, and master himself. Let me check for notes, actually, before I go into that. Here we are. Petrarch, in his ignorance. Aristotle, in Petrarch's view, never fulfills his initial promise in the Nicomachean Ethics of making man better. Quote, "It is one thing to know, another to love, one thing to understand, another to will. He teaches what virtue is, I do not deny that, but his lesson lacks the words that stings and set fire, and urge towards love of virtue, and hatred of vice, or at any rate, does not have enough such power." He is comparing Aristotle to Cicero or Seneca, and he almost certainly did not realize that he was dealing with Aristotle's lecture notes rather than his published works. To free himself from Goblin? To free whose self from Goblin? Oh, from the tyranny of this passion, and to master himself, to free himself from goblins. Yeah, there's a little goblin, no doubt, scampering around. His poetry is thus extremely introspective. His famous collections of poems, the Songbook, recounts this psychological struggle and reveals Petrarch's defeat. It is a lament for his servitude, a proclamation of his shame, and a moral example for others. Petrarch's poetry, however, is also the means by which he fights against this passion, bringing himself back to himself and revealing love as a kind of subjection that must be overcome through the contemplation of death and the brevity of life, which reveals the hollowness of this passion for an earthly object. There's a note here. Mazzotta argues that Petrarch, I think Mazzotta is some kind of a scholar, operates with a peculiarly modern notion of the self as an isolated subject who reflects on his memories, impulses, and desires in the attempt to create a self-enclosed fictional universe that rejects time and his history and makes the self the idolatrous counterpart to God. Such a view, however, wrongly assimilates Petrarch's notion of the individual to the Cartesian notion of subjectivity. For Petrarch, the self is always in and of the world. It is not a res cogitans over and against a res extensa. It constantly struggles with the world, but the world is not an alien other. Excuse me. Love for Petrarch, in contrast to Dante, is not the solution to the human problem, but a great danger. For unless we are attracted to the appropriate object, love enslaves us and distracts us from both virtue and God. Thinking is motivated by love, but love must have the right object. Love for earthly things can be overcome, as Petrarch tries to demonstrate with his own example, only when it contemplates death and the transience of all the earthly objects of passion. The disdain for created forms that the constant thought of death engenders is thus the first step on the path to virtue. Virtue can only be attained, however, if we are also attracted to the proper object, if we come to love what is truly worthy of love. In Petrarch's mind, the only earthly object so worthy is virtue, and the strongest spur to virtue is a love of fame. It is this idea that draws Petrarch to the ancients. Petrarch knew from his study of Aristotle that virtue was attained through habituation and the imitation of a good man. The problem for his world, however, was that there were no institutions that fostered individual virtue, and too few good men to emulate. Contemporary humanity thus could be moved to pursue virtue only if it was confronted with inspiring images of the virtuous life. In Petrarch's view, the creation of such images was the job of poetry. Thus he felt that only the poetic presentation of exemplary lives could promote the will to act virtuously, and he believed he had found such models in the ancient worlds. In 1337, Petrarch began work on his Illustrative Lives, a treatise that he hoped would encourage virtue by presenting a series of exemplary heroic lives. Like Livy and Plutarch, Petrarch uses history as a pool of moral examples. He tries to show in this work that the achievements of illustrious men are not the good result of good luck, but the product of virtue and desire for glory. The examples, however, are quite different from one another. There is no single path to virtue. In fact, the lesson of the work is that virtue is not the assimilation of each individual to an ideal, but the attainment of what is essential to each individual's character and capacities. Virtue. There's a notes here. Drawing on Cicero, Petrarch asserts that his coronation oration, that passion and a desire for glory are essential to any great work of spirit. Another note, in this respect, Petrarch found the Romans superior to the Greeks because they avoided excessively intellectualizing the question of virtue. On the question of moral virtue, Petrarch firmly believed that the Romans had improved on what they had received from the Greeks. Later in life, Petrarch became increasingly interested in Caesar and wrote an extensive life of him as well, entitled De Gestis Caesaris. He apparently never believed that he was as virtuous as Scipio, but was attracted to him against his sympathies by his greatness. Where are we? Petrarch constructs his project on Roman models, drawing on Livy, Virgil, Horace, Cicero, and Seneca. In Petrarch's view, Aristotle may well have had a more profound understanding of virtue, but he did not provide the means to make men good. The Roman moralists, by contrast, were concerned with what morality was, and with inspiring men to act morally. Petrarch cast himself in a similar role as a lay moral counselor to his contemporaries, showing them magnificent examples of moral action, and calling on them to raise themselves to a higher level, to emulate and compete with these glorious men of the past. While working on the illustrative lives, hello, Mike. How you doing? How you doing, Mike? I hope you're doing well. Welcome in. Wait, hang on. You wink. Wait, no, it's not catching my eye. There we go. that was better. That was a better, more fluid. Let me try the other eye. Nope, close the other eye. There we go. How you doing? I hope you're doing well. Thank you. Thank you for the face hold. Very much appreciated. Very much appreciated. It's always appreciated, guys. Trust me. You're in a Pathfinder session, trying not to die, so you're lurking. No worries, no worries. So is it like a proper D&D game, or are you playing the Pathfinder video games? Whichever it is, I hope you win. I hope you win. Or you do some. If you're playing a session with people, proper D&D, I hope you clever. No, how dare you? No. Someone's already gotten one-shotted. No, I'm getting one-shotted by the fake folks right now. I hope you guys manage to survive. When in doubt, surrender and offer up to join the crew. I was using ChatGPT. I made it do like a whole scenario where we were like in Exandria, the Critical Role universe on the Sword Coast. I think it was that one. And I was like a sailor on a trade ship, and we were just going about our day. And then we were attacked by pirates, and I could tell it wanted me to save. Oh, no, sorry. No, this was like, I just had it come up. I just told it, like, create a roleplay scenario in the Critical World universe of Exandria. This is ChatGPT. I haven't played proper D&D, but I was just bored one day, and I just wanted to mess around with stuff. And then I was like, I actually just decided, fuck this, I'm going to go join the pirates. So my guy is now part of the pirate crew. Proper D&D kind of slaps, to be fair. I'd like to try it. It literally throughout the whole event of this guy who was a complete newbie to being a sailor of any kind. He was only just like an early adventurer. It wasn't even D&D. It's more of like a choose your own adventure thing. You don't have stats or anything. The ChatGPT just gives you stuff and you kind of just act on it. It was like everyone was almost dead. Most of the trade ship was dead. Like there was a couple of prisoners. There was one guy who was named. I'd already like killed my former captain as a way to try and like show, hey, I'm part of the crew, guys. I was here all the time. I was below deck. And I'm writing about how like it's too late. It's too late to fight back, and it kept giving me scenarios. It was like, is Thurston going to try and defend, take back the ship? Oh, there's some water spilling on, but because of some fire hit the pirate boat. Is Thurston gonna take advantage? It's like, what the fuck do you expect me to do? There's like 40 of them. There's 40 of them on one boat, and there's like another 20 on the other. They've killed everyone. No, I'm not gonna try and fight them back. Thurston's scared out of his mind. He's shitting his pants. He's barely holding it together, and it's only through the instruction of his not exactly abusive but very very ruthless and savvy business man of a father who drilled in the ideas of always getting the best deal and playing to the crowd. But he preferred his other older two brothers, so he cast them out to find his own way, while the other two brothers would get the business. I just came up with that like little background on him as I went through the story. It's only through like that like ability to play to the crowd is he like even alive right now. I think part two. I think part two of my own little. I think someday I should do that as a stream. I just go on the chat GBT, just get the screen up on the side and just talk through it, read through whatever chat GBT comes up with, and we just kind of like role play from there and be like, okay, what do we do, guys? What do we do? That could be a lot of fun, actually. The issue with ChatGPT though is that it doesn't want. Obviously, you know, there's issues with it. Like, it often won't. Maybe making it do D&D rolls might actually be good though, because I think it can definitely do that type of stuff. So maybe making, and then it would be forced into bad situations, because often it can be too friendly, too like supportive. Like, it never wants you to die or fail. So if you say you try to do something, you will almost always succeed. So you kind of have to tell it every now and again, like, hey, make it so that I can fail. Make it so that I can fail. But it was kind of cool. My guy, he realized he was scared and he didn't want to. He thought everything was lost. They're all so dead. What was the dungeon generator thing that was kind of like ChatGPT? Was that AI Dungeon? Was it just called AI Dungeon, maybe? The one that instantly turned lewd? I'm not familiar with that one. Maybe that was AI Dungeon. I've heard of various things like that. Like, I've heard of D&D GBT or whatever. AI Dungeon was the one, was it? Yeah, I think I remember. I remember looking things up when I realized that I could use ChatGPT for that. I looked up things for it, for like proper things that were dedicated to it. And AI Dungeon was one that came up, and I'm pretty sure I looked at it, I read about it, and it was very much like a erotica type thing. No. It's like that Skyrim mod. That Skyrim, you know, you've been defeated mod. Femrua? No, that's Ruette. That's Ruette. Ruadhette. I remember one time I posted in a wrong place that was for female VTubers, but it was kind of a very pretty art of me. It was actually one of my first skebs, I believe. Actually, I think it was my very first skeb. Where was it? So it was kind of okay, I think. Where's my Twitch? No, seriously, what? Where's my Twitch folder? There it is. Ew, why is it in view format? Large icons. There we go. Scoob. Why is this in view? Large icons. Who uses view? Other than like when you're looking at like files, like folders and folders. Who did it? Who did it again? I think it was Dotto, Endorin, Irikamo. Ah, here it is. It was, I think it was this one that I posted. This is one of my older skebs that I got when I was still just a sketchy boy. It was definitely more twinkish, let's say. I think is just the best word to use, because I think everyone can understand what that means. But I suppose would you even say yeah, I mean, would you say ikimen? Very, very soft. But I think it was really nice, very nicely done, very pretty. I was really happy with the quality of this like very first skeb that I got. The person who does this also does some of my favorite Genzuki Tojiro art. That's an Ikimen Gale right there. Don't you think do you guys think it's an upgrade, or do you think it's like a downgrade? Like, okay, if I don't have any of the fancy gear, you know, I've been reading it. I don't even have my book up. Like, it's an upgrade, or is it just like a side grade, like a different taste of something? That one doesn't have a braid, but maybe you like the more gentle side of it. That's your Friday casual get up. Yeah, I lose all this muscle for some reason. Now you can still see that like there's a little bit of strength there. There's a little bit of strength, but that's definitely a softer version of me, I suppose. But this is the one I posted where it was meant to be female VTubers, and I was like, "Oops, sorry," and they were like, "Oh, Ruadh, it's Ruadh. She's so pretty." Wait a minute. What's going on? Where's your pants, Ruadh? Huh? I don't wear pants. That's a Lena, so it extends down past. I mean, there were pants in medieval Ireland. I'm just saying, but sometimes they didn't have them. Oop, I moved you guys. Didn't want to do that. Want to move me? Like I don't have pants either. Usually, so like usually I am pantsless. Do with that what you will. Must just be a low-cut tunic. I suppose I will say I did once have my old sketchy self had an alternative version. I actually had to go back to my to my friend Dance again to slightly raise the thing. Hello, Hyperace. Welcome in, welcome in. How you doing? Lovely to have you. I had to go back to my, because the first one he did was like a little too high. I was like, Dance. You're gonna have to pick that up. You're gonna have to pick it up. Let me see if I can find that old one. I had to make it longer 2 times. Where was it? Because I definitely have like, surely I have the original one somewhere. That's the one that I decided on. Hang on. Is it not there? Surely it would be. No, that's my old sketchy self. It's definitely somewhere. I'm just not too sure where it might be. No, those are all my normal things. Basic. Huh. I wonder where I went. Oh, maybe this was it. Maybe this was it. Yeah. So I think it was, if I do this, so you had that one. You were tired. I hope you get some nice eep. I hope you get some nice eep soon. And it was this one. I think anyway. Okay, yeah, yeah. See how the white part is like slightly higher. These look very grey. I eventually upscaled the color on them, so I was less grey. But do you see how the okay? These are like these are like different sizes. So, but see how I had different color leg, or not color legs, um, size liners. They're not skirts. Don't call them skirts. I will hit you with my sword. Oh my god! I almost deleted everything. I almost deleted every single source. I would have been very upset. Don't you sus me. Don't you sus. After that, not safe for work. I don't know. I feel like. Here's the thing about hit me. That's quite the thing. That's quite the thing to say. Your waist is much more accentuated there. I suppose so. Yeah, I think the. Well, I suppose the belt. Let me hang on. Let me look at myself real quick. Stun locked. Yeah, I'm not used to it. Um, I think the belt on the other one was kind of higher up, so it pulled it in tighter. Kind of higher up on the kind of waist. While this one is kind of more loose and sitting. Like even though things are folded up over it, like because of this fold here, which technically is how they used to do it, because the Lenas used to have a lot of fabric, so they would pull it up and over to kind of show like look at how much fabric we have. They do it that way, but because it's folded, it doesn't give that sense of like of uh, accentuation. No, that no, no, that one hit my nose. You got me in the nose. Okay. Alright. I'm gonna step back in closer. And put my clothes back on. I was slightly cold. Okay. Let me get back to reading because I think... What time is it? Okay, we might actually be able to finish this off. Will we? Maybe... If I finish strong. While working on his illustrative lines, Petrarch was struck with the idea of composing an epic poem in Latin that would provide the supreme example of the virtuous life. Two possibilities presented themselves to him. Julius Caesar, the medieval hero who founded the universal and divinely ordained empire, and Scipio Africanus, who saved the Roman Republic by defeating Hannibal and the Carthaginians. Petrarch chose to focus on Scipio and titled his poem Africa. In this work, Scipio's triumph over Carthage and the virtues of the Republican Rome come in large measure to replace Caesar's more problematic virtues and his foundation of the Roman Empire as a supreme model of the virtuous life. In part, this choice is a reflection of Petrarch's underlying Republican sympathies, which were also evident in his friendship and support for Cola da Rienzo's Republican Revolution in Rome in 1347. Scipio, however, was also a better example for Petrarch, because he was more reflective and introspective than Caesar. Petrarch's Scipio is beautiful, tall, barrel-chested, muscular, chaste, and tranquil. He possesses great gravity and grace. He is a harsh foe, a sweet friend, immune to fortune's boons and blows, and indifferent to wealth. He venerates true glory, is pious, filled with rectitude, and confident in battle and courageous. He is also a lover of solitude, beauty, justice, and his fatherland. It is hard to imagine a more perfect man. Scipio for Petrarch is exemplary, not merely because he conquers Carthage, but because he conquers himself. If it is this that makes him a true paragon of virtue, he is not only virtuous. Virtue is the only thing that delights him. Virtue, as he sees it, is the only truly lovable thing, because it conquers death and ensures one's fame, which stands fast against everything except time that undoes everything. Petrarch's Hannibal, by contrast, is a man without virtue. His martial skills are easily equal to those of Scipio, but he is faithless and untrustworthy, resentful of the world and the gods, cruel of heart, insatiate for blood. In league with infernal powers, given to savage wrath, impious and overconfident. All of his victories are thus hollow and empty because he is not master of himself, but a slave to his passions. For similar reasons, he is incapable of true friendship and unable to endure solitude. Africa thus presents two, and when Africa is the poem, Africa thus presents two supreme moral examples: the virtuous and heroic man who can disdain fortune because of the strength of his character, and the Machiavellian man who is willing to do anything to secure victory, but who is never master of himself and his own desires. Both dramatically and philosophically, however, the work is flawed. Dramatically, its hero is simply too good. He has nothing to overcome, no internal struggle, no flaws with which we can sympathize. He is a statue placed on a pedestal so high above the reader's mind that he is scarcely possible to behold him, let alone emulate him. Philosophically, the work fails because it vacillates between the praise of fame and the praise of virtue. Petrarch knew that most great men are motivated for a desire of fame, and wished that only the virtuous would attain glory, but he knew that this is not the case. Scipio's virtue inspires virtue in his fellow Romans, and they conquer the vicious Hannibal and his money-loving Carthaginians. But they were also fortunate, for except for a moment of overconfidence after the Battle of Cannae, Hannibal would have sacked Rome itself. Scipio's victory and fame thus seem to owe as much to fortune as they do to virtue. This point is evident at the beginning of the work, when the ghost of Scipio's father tells him that while his victory will work... Wait a minute, this isn't a Scipio book. That's true. For some reason, we've turned around to look at Scipio, which I think is perfect. Now you guys know exactly where he's drawing upon these ideas. You guys know all about Scipio, and you guys could tell me all about Scipio. See, guys, I planned this well in advance, clearly. 6 months ago, I was putting together a reading list. It was Scipio all along. You know what? I think Michael Allen Gillespie is wrong on his account, clearly. It's not the debate between scholasticism and nominalism that engenders all of modernity. Rather, it's Scipio. It's just Scipio. Everything can be traced back to Scipio. The Persian Wars in Greece, the Peloponnesian Wars between Athens and Sparta, the rise of Macedon, the succession wars, the rise of Rome. It's all just a prelude to Scipio Africanus. The theological origins of Africanus. That made me giggle. He was so main character, he's now in all the books. He is everywhere. I do that sometimes, if I see a certain person, I'm like, oh, it's... I do that scene from, I can't remember what movie it's from, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio when he's sitting watching a movie. I think, is it Wolf of Wall Street? I don't, maybe. And he clicks and he points at the thing. I go, oh, look, it's him. Yeah, I think it's Wolf of Wall Street. Where were we? I'm actually going to take a quick look at the notes for this part. So all these will be notes. Where? Oh yeah. For well schooled, the leader of the virtuous host has marked fate's oscillations and gains against every chance prepared himself. That's again about Scipio. This picture of Scipio is quite similar to Petrarch's later version of the characteristics of a good prince. According to Petrarch, the prince should be lovable, just, promote public works, be careful of the use of public funds, contribute to new taxes, avoid cruelty and excessive delegation of powers, cherish friendship and be free from vanity and overweening pride. The power of this idea is evident in its continuing impact many years on. Later, on Erasmus. So, Education of a Christian Prince by Erasmus. This is a preeminent theme in his book. Nothing man does last forever, nothing that pertains to man save his immortal soul. Work shall fail, land shall decay, a building shall fall down. Ooh. The appendix is just an entire chapter about Scipio. I think every book should have that from now on. Fantastic Mr. Fox, Scipio. The History of Rome, Scipio, of course. The History of Greece, Scipio. A cookbook about cookies, Scipio. You gotta know Scipio's favorite cookies. Accounting, the history of Ireland, Scipio. Yes. Don't you guys know that Rome supposedly are descendants of Troy, and so are the Irish. I don't Quilta, Scipio. Self-help book, Scipio has to be there. Scipio probably would be a good character to have a self book about. Yeah. I remember, well, was it the Fourth Crusade or something? I remember I saw a meme that apparently, like, I think it was the Christians sacking the Byzantines, like Byzantium or something. And was it the Byzantines? And they were like, "This is revenge for Troy." Wait, let me try and find that meme. This is revenge for Troy. Or was it? I can't remember where I saw that. It was like some group that claimed descendants from Troy. Oh yes, here it is. Here it is. This is the image. It's so stupid. I love this image so much. To justify their actions, French leaders of the Crusade, I'm guessing this is the Fourth Crusade, or was it the Fifth, claim that they were taking their revenge against the Greeks for the fall of their ancient Trojan homeland. I'm just picturing like a bunch of Byzantine soldiers like looking down at like the French crusaders and be like, "What did we ever do to you?" This is for Troy. They're just so confused. It just makes me giggle every time. I'm sorry, anyone who is relaxing. It just makes me giggle. Maybe my giggles are ASMR inducing. Hopefully, we literally are Trojans, though. Troy Bolt, Deus Troy, God wills Troy. Okay, let me keep going. How long have I been streaming for? An hour and a half. Maybe we could get this chapter done. It's only another like 10, 12 pages. You don't think that's what the Pope intended? No. But the Venetians, I think, turned attention. I think they had to go attack. Well, they didn't have to, but they had to pay off the Venetians, and they were like, "Hey, why don't you guys attack Byzantines?" Hint, 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 hint. And then they attacked the Byzantines. Anyway, let's get back to the book. This point is evident at the beginning of the work, when the ghost of Scipio's father tells him that while his victory will win great fame for him and great longevity for Rome, both will fade. Over time, he and Hannibal will win equal share of praise because the vulgar multitude cannot discern the gap that yawns between magnificence and dawn and deeds of foul enormity. Moreover, even Rome shall fade and become merely a corrupt and pale image of its former self. Quote, all that is born must die, and after ripeness comes decay. No thing of earth endures. Thus time triumphs over fame. Thus it is not glory that one should pursue, but virtue. For virtue alone, that heeds not death, endures. Virtue alone prepares the way to heaven. Fame is a reward that others give to greatness, whether for good or ill. Virtue is often unrecognized by others, but it is good in itself because it secures a victory over the passions, and thus guarantees self-mastery. In the public sphere, virtue is thus inevitably entangled with the desire for glory. The desire for glory, however, does not necessarily produce virtue, and may produce the most monstrous vices. The ground for true virtue thus cannot lie in the love of fame. Hence, Petrarch recognized that the magnificent examples of greatness from the ancient world that he had sought to portray in the illustrative lives in Africa were simply inadequate as grounds for the inculcation of moral virtue. As a result, he continued work on this text and on a third book, Memorable Things, Rerum Mirandum, in which he planned a systemic induction through examples in the four cardinal virtues as defined by Cicero, drawing on secular rather than sacred sources. Instead, he turned in a new direction that was to have immense importance for modern thought, to an introspective examination and critique of himself. I got poked in the face. Welcome in, Zar. Wait, what was that? Wait, what was it? How did I pronounce it? Zaranese. That's actually a nice sounding name. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Zaranese. Very pretty name, but welcome in. Thank you so much for the follow. I hope you have a nice relaxing time. Petrarch's Christianity. In order to understand this inward turn, we need to examine briefly the impact of Christianity on Petrarch's thought. As we saw above, human beings for Petrarch live in a chaotic world and are constantly pulled by their passions of love in multiple directions. Such loves, however, fade in the face of death. Death itself, in turn, can be overcome by fame, and fame falls prey to time. But is there anything that overcomes time for Petrarch, within the context of the ancient world with which Petrarch was primarily concerned? Only virtue seemed to offer such a possibility. For virtue, at least as it was understood by Plato and the public and the Stoics, touches the eternal. Virtue, in the end, however, is insufficient, for it is not clearly superior to time. The triumph over time is thus made possible only by Christianity, and we can come to terms with Petrarch's thought at the deepest level only when we understood what Christianity meant for him. And there's two notes here. Africa was left unfinished in 1345 and never published in Petrarch's lifetime. Mazzotta argues that Petrarch attempted to write. Thank you so much, Anna Frakova. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Very nice to have you. Hi. That's such a cute emote. Little bouncing bee. Cute little bouncing bee. Very cute. Welcome in. Thank you very much for joining us. We're just doing a little bit of reading. Mazzotta argues that Petrarch attempted to write political poems, but as their rhetoric failed, the failures gave him an alibi to retreat from a ghostly, unrealizable world of history, to the obsessive absorption with his own private self, which is simultaneously empowered by love and the powerlessness in love. This view of Petrarch, however, fails to see the multiple ways in which the self he imagines remains in and part of the world, especially in and with his friends. And another note, Petrarch lays out this argument in his Triophini, or Triumphs, which were written between 1340 and 74. The first details the triumph of carnal love, over the human heart. The second, the triumph of a chaste love over carnal love. The third, victory of death over the chaste love. The fourth, of triumph over fame, of fame over death. The fifth, the victory of time over fame. The sixth, the triumph of eternity over time. And he mentions here that Laura, who was represented by chaste love, reappears in heaven. The triumphs sum up Petrarch's entire philosophical position. They restore the coherent order of the world as a hierarchical arrangement of values, from love of self to love of God, in a linear and progressive movement. You need to go sleeps. It's 1 in the morning, so you'll only be lurking here until you fall asleep. No worries, Anna. This is why I do my little reading streams, to help people fall asleep and get nice and eepy. So feel free to lurk away. Have a lovely sleep. I hope you fall asleep soon and have very, very sweet dreams. So I hope you can be like little Ruru over here, nice and cozy. It is often assumed that Petrarch was devoutly Christian, but this position is difficult to reconcile with his classicism. Many scholars see a distinctive turn towards Christianity in Petrarch's life after 1343, when his brother Gerardo became a Carthusian monk. This event supposedly evoked a spiritual crisis in him that changed his whole outlook. There is, however, little evidence to support such a contention. In fact, there are many indications that his growing concern with sacred writings and his waning attention to the examples of antiquity had more to do with his reflections on the limitations of fame than with any spiritual crisis. There are, moreover, good reasons to be suspicious of Petrarch's Christianity. Thank you so much, Bobby Ducky V. Wait, what was it? I saw Bobby. Thank you so much, Bobby Dukyevsky. Bobby Dukyevsky. That's a cool name, Dukyevsky. But thank you for the follow. Welcome in, welcome in. Whoa, there's a lot of them coming in today, it seems. Excuse me. Sorry for interrupting. No worries at all. We literally just had like a 10-minute break from reading. Not only like 15 minutes ago, I want to say, where I just rambled about things. People were calling that my Lena was short, my tunic was a little too short, and that I was lacking pants. How dare they? I hope you have an amazing weekend. I hope you do as well. Bobby. I must say I had initially a rough start to my weekend. OBS was was not working for me, but everything seems to at least be momentarily fixed, so that's good at least. It's been good so far. I'm delighted to hear. We're just doing a little bit of reading, so I hope you can get nice and cozy and enjoy. It is doubtful, for example, that he ever took any interest in the Christian virtues of faith, hope, and charity. Or as Voigt point out, quote, "It is truly unique that Petrarch in his writings speaks so rarely of saints and of heresies, of miracles and relics, of visions and revelations. For all of what the Church had made from time of the first fathers, for all of that melange which is in it of paganism and superstition, for that final hierarchy, he has nothing but indifference." To tell the truth, Petrarch had so little connection to the Christianity of the Middle Ages that he seems to be oblivious to the problem of damnation. In contrast to Dante, whose work he knew and admired, he ignores the Christian view that hell and damnation are a completion of divine justice and an element of beatitude. There is similarly no allusion to the importance or even the need for prayer, and divine grace itself is virtually ignored in favor of a quasi-Pelagian preference for virtue. Finally, Petrarch suggests that even if the soul were mortal, it would be better to think of it as immortal, for doing so would inspire a love of virtue, which is a thing to be desired for its own sake. Petrarch's concern with religion thus seems to be more a concern with the subjectivity of belief and the sense of salvation, but how the individual in this world regards himself in a relationship to divine promises. Hmm. So you were asking earlier, I guess he is somewhat Pelagian in that sense. Clever. Is there any further notes? Don't see any here. There is one for 79. I'll keep an eye out for when that comes up. In this respect, Petrarch, like the novelist, sees Christianity through the lens of Augustine, and in his case through an Augustine who was deeply influenced by pagan thinkers such as Plato and Cicero. We today often assume that Augustine was the bedrock of medieval Christianity, but in fact his work was generally known only from the excerpts presented in Peter Lombard's famous sentences. Moreover, with the revival of Aristotle in the 13th century, Augustine suffered a marked decline, although the Franciscans and Augustinian hermits remained loyal to him. It was thus only with the nominalist revolution and the rise of humanism that Augustine returned to the centre of theological and political speculation. Was that the... No, 79. So Platonic realists and nominalists both draw from Plato? Well, much so, I suppose, in the sense that I mean, Plato posits and basically begins this whole discussion. Well, not the whole. Sort of, yeah. I suppose he does kind of he creates the forms. Well, I suppose not the Parmenians, the Pythagoreans before him. Is Platonic meaning like non-sexual related to Plato? No. Platonic realists and nominalists both draw from Plato. Like nominalists in the sense that they would have rejected Plato's realism. They would have rejected the forms entirely. They reject the conception of the universals completely. Platonic love for your friends because we all read Plato. Exactly, Mike. Exactly. Platonic here, Lancelot, I think simply means in reference to Plato. The Platonic forms are like perfect form of a thing. Which is probably where the term like Platonic love comes from, because it's meant to be like opposed to purely lustful love. You mean like weird of them to draw from Augustine, who drew from Plato, to argue against Plato? Ah, yes. I see where you're coming from. I'm not too familiar with Augustine, I must say, although I do know that he drew very heavily from Plato. And the book references that themselves, so there must be something in there that Petrarch and other nominalists kind of use to take out of it. So we should see. Here we are. See, literally, if I would have just started reading the next paragraph. Billy, I still don't have a shirtless redeem or command. You keep doing that. I do want to go back to my mama and get a logo done, or at least not a logo, like a art. What's it called? Reference art, which would hopefully have a cool logo. I would like to get alternative hair, and maybe just an underlying body. That would be cool to have. Not detailed in much, but just like a body, a full body. I don't know. Alternative hairstyles, definitely. You know what, Billy? You know what? Would you like me to lose a piece of clothing, not my Lena? The cloak or the eoner? Would you like one of those to go? Because you're currently melting onto the floor, and I feel like if I don't stop this, you're going to get onto my feet. I'm going to like step in you later and be like, ugh, you. And I'm wearing sandals too. There's no like shoes to block it. I think he may have already melted too far. Oh no. But anyway, the Petrarch sees Augustine philosophically as a Platonist. Petrarch, however, did not know Plato well. He believed, for example, that for Plato the final good is virtue, which can only be attained by imitating God. Therefore, he was convinced that for Plato to philosophize was to love God. This is a point, he argued, with which Augustine agreed. Furthermore, since, quote, there can be no doubt that the only true knowledge is to know and to honor God, it follows that piety is wisdom. To know God, however, one must know oneself. The supreme philosophical and theological work is thus Augustine's Confessions. It was this work, above all others, that shaped Petrarch's Christianity. The importance of Augustine for Petrarch becomes apparent in his famous account of his ascent of Mount Ventoux, allegorizing his brother's direct descent up the mountain and his wayward course to their different approaches to the divine. He writes that when he reached the summit, he sat down and opened his copy of the Confessions, and his eyes immediately fell upon the following passage. Quote, "And men admire the high mountains, the vast flood of seas, the huge streams of the rivers, the circumference of the ocean, and the revolutions of the stars, and desert themselves." He says that he was stunned and angry with himself that he still admired earthly things. He concludes, citing Seneca, that long since I ought to have learned, even from pagan philosophers, that nothing is admirable besides the mind. Compared to its greatness, nothing is great. What he learned from Augustine, and what he feels he ought to have learned already from Seneca, was the comparative unimportance of earthly goods, including fame, and the crucial need for examination, self-examination. For it is only by knowing oneself that it is possible to come to know the eternal. It was by knowing oneself that it was possible. It was this insight that was at the heart of the great transformation in Petrarch's thought that produced his most introspective and penetrating work, My Secret, or The Soul's Conflict with the Passion. So, up to 85. Let's see what notes we have here. Oh, my Eoner's gone. Bosma suggests that the Augustinianism seemed to provide an answer to the problems of modern society that scholasticism did not, because it treated men not just as disembodied minds, but as bodies and passions as well. Petrarch elaborates this point in the Remedies. Philosophy often offers not wisdom, but the love of wisdom. Therefore, whoever wants her must win her through love. Through wisdom can be grasped and loved only by pure and pious minds. Regarding this it is written, Pietas e sapitena, piety is wisdom. The philosophers, likewise, discussed the mysteries of nature as if they came straight from heaven and attended the privy councils of Almighty God, forgetting that it is written, For who hath known the mind of the Lord? And then one last one. In this admission we see a movement from Petrarch's earlier Stoic humanism to Augustinian humanism. Petrarch's search for himself. My Secret has been called the most scathing self-examination that any man has ever made. There's a large note here. Augustine wanted to see a movement. What the hell happened? Oh, here we are. Augustine, you know what happened? Do you guys ever read a line and then your eyes go back to the same line? Like you finish a line and you go straight back and you're like, huh? Didn't I just read this? Augustine wanted to convert others, while Petrarch's self-examination, which remained unpublished, was only undertaken on his own behalf. Foster reminds us that while Petrarch cultivated self-disclosure more than any previous human being of whom we have record, there is some deliberate impersonation in his accounts. Excuse me. It is written as 3 confessional dialogues between Petrarch and Augustine. The first dialogue begins with Augustine's assertion that Petrarch needs to remember, above all else, that he is mortal. For there can be no doubt that to recollect one's misery and to practice frequent meditation on death is the surest aid in scorning the seductions of the world and ordering the soul amidst its storms and tempests. This is the triumph of death over the passions that we discussed above. He asserts, however, that Petrarch, like most men, failed to confront death with its needed seriousness and deceives himself continually about himself, clinging willingly to his own miseries. The rest of the first dialogue lays stress on the self-redressing power of the will. Knowledge, Augustine repeatedly asserts, is insufficient to bring about Petrarch's moral reformation. There must be will, and the will must be strong and earnest that it can deserve the name purpose. The good can only be truly loved if Petrarch thrusts out every lower desire, and it is only the profound meditation on death that makes purgation possible. Petrarch recognized that the will had been crucial in Augustine's own conversion. And a note here, Foster argues that while Petrarch seeks to purge himself of many of his passions, he never renounces the classics, which remain for him the incomparable patrimony of human wisdom. Indeed, in Foster's view, the whole work is classicist propaganda. Excuse me. Let me have a quick sip of water. I do apologize if that was loud. I kind of just... I could breathe it in wrong. Was classicist propaganda that finds common ground between ancient paganism and Christianity in opposition to the real Augustine, who rejected Platonic dualism and the Stoic ideas of passionless virtue. You did not hear a thing. Oh, I kind of coughed. I don't know if maybe it blocked it. Maybe it caught it. I don't know. Oh wait, I'm in the wrong page. No, wait, am I? Oh, here we are. In the second dialogue, Petrarch's morals are evaluated in terms of the traditional 7 mortal sins. While he is acquainted with envy, anger, and gluttony, he is charged, to his surprise, with pride and avarice, and not to his surprise, with lust and melancholia. Acedia. In contrast to the first dialogue, however, the second focuses on failures of the mind rather than the will. But in this dialogue, Augustine relaxes his moral strictures and says he never meant to urge Stoic abnegation on Petrarch, but only a kind of peripatetic moderation. That said, the dialogue closes with a characteristic Stoic claim that a soul serene and tranquil, in itself, will not be affected by the cares of the world. The third dialogue is a discussion of Petrarch's 2 most profoundly moving passions, love and fame. His love of Laura is characterized as a form of idolatry that robs him of dignity and liberty, and intensifies his melancholia, undermines his morals, and turns his desires from creator to the creature. As we saw in our discussions of the songbook, both the human self and God are forgotten in such love. Glory is only accounted a false sense of immortality. But Petrarch is unable, or at least unwilling, to renounce it. He does agree, however, to take Augustine's advice to aim at virtue and let glory take care of itself. This pathway to virtue, however, lies not in scholastic investigation of man's place in the natural order of things, but in an introspective examination of the individual self. This examination, at least in my secret, is achieved through an inner and imaginary dialogue with a spiritual mentor. In this case, a friend that Petrarch knew only from books, but in Petrarch's mind a friend nonetheless. The self is thus understood not immediately, but through dialogue or discussion. Self-knowledge thus comes about through what seeing oneself, through the eyes of another, but another who is also in some selves another self. As Petrarch later remarks in the Remedies, such talk, quote, will discover you unto yourself, who, seeing all things, sees not yourself. The purpose of such a discovery is not merely self-understanding, but self-improvement and self-perfection. Let's take a look at some of the notes here. I'm sure there's quite a few. There is considerable disagreement about the word axidia in Petrarch's thought, melancholia. In the Christian context, it generally means sloth, but in Petrarch's case, it seems to be much closer to melancholy. Indeed, some scholars trace the modern notion of melancholia to this discussion of axidia in My Secret. Later humanists, drawing on Plato's Symposium, were able to describe a ladder of love, by which thought was led upwards. But the Symposium had not yet been translated into Latin in Petrarch's time. Yes, I believe later, some of the Neoplatonists anyway, started talking about that the primary attribute of God would be love. I think Christian thinkers had this as well. But it was essentially God in his fullness of eternity, of power, and his love, his overflowing love essentially overflows is the proper term, outward, creating the world and everything in it and all those things, and ultimately to get back to God, which is kind of the teleological aim of humans. Well, not the aim of humans, but possibly the mind to ascend the material world would be to return to that kind of loving embrace. Petrarch's path in this respect is quite different from that of Descartes, who also comes to term with himself through a dialogue, but a dialogue that excludes all others. The exploration of the self in Petrarch is a manifestation of the phenomenon of friendship. Man made a tulpa. This becomes clear, and this is the bit about self-improvement and self-perfection. This becomes clear if we compare My Secret to its obvious model, Augustine's Confessions. In the Confessions, Augustine speaks directly to God, lays bare his soul to one who already knows it thoroughly, in hopes of forgiveness and redemption of his sins. In My Secret, Petrarch speaks to a human being long dead, who of course does not know anything about him, with the goal not of gaining forgiveness but of curing himself. He does not throw himself on God's mercy, but hopes through his imaginary therapeutic conversation to himself, to free himself from the passions that have distracted and enslaved him. His goal is thus not redemption, but self-perfection, and he hopes to achieve this not by grace, but by the human will. At the center of My Secret is thus not a God, but the ideal of undifferentiated moral perfection, ontologically Platonist and morally Stoic. Moreover, the Augustine who appears in My Secret is more akin to Seneca than to the Augustine who actually wrote the Confessions or the City of God. There's some notes here. It must be admitted that Augustine is a saint, and that the saints were often conceived as mediators or intercessors for man with God. There is also almost no indication in My Secret itself that Petrarch seeks any such intercession. Trincos suggests that My Secret, Petrarch's goal is to offer cures for his contemporary spiritual maladies. And Cassirer sees this as an essential moment of humanism, in that man attains his true nature when he gives himself his own nature. The superiority of the private life. What pages is this? God, there's still a good bit left. How long have I been going for? Just about 2 hours, but I did talk a lot. How long would it take to do this? Where am I? I'm at... So that's... one... Oh, I can't turn the page. 1, 2, 3... Turn the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Effectively 10 pages. Sorry, I'm just kind of deciding whether to will I try and finish out this part of the book or not? Because I've kind of been getting caught. Like, usually I try and do about 25 to 30 pages, but obviously this stream was, you know what? The way you're talking here is also really pleasant, to be honest. my kind of talking to myself. You'd like a summary since it's a lot on Petrarch and quotes. Yeah, I know. Maybe I'll try and do a summary at some point. Maybe I'll try. At least do a quick read through of kind of I guess the main points. Was it like when I was just kind of like, how do I do this? Just trying to figure out. Am I gonna read this or not? Okay, so there's maybe one or two. Was it that type of way of talking, Lancelot, when I was like barely even focused on you guys? I do love that type of talking in ASMR. That sort of really soft talking where sometimes you can hear like yeah, that's the one. That's what I might do for ASMR, like proper ASMR, where I'm kind of just like barely talking, and you can just about hear what I'm saying. And you know, there's not a whole lot of sound going on, but it's just enough for you guys to hear. Excuse me. We'll do another couple of pages and I'll see how I feel. The superiority of the private life. At the end of my secret, Petrarch promises Augustine, I will be true to myself so far as in me lies. I will pull myself together and collect my scattered wits, and make me a great endeavour to possess my soul in patience. He foresees, however, that he will be distracted from this goal by a crowd of important worldly affairs. A life of virtue in which one remains true to oneself requires removal from the press of daily life. Petrarch explains and justifies this retreat into solitary life. In this work, written during the plague years, he lays out a path between the vita activia of classic virtue that he portrayed in Africa, and the vita contemplativa of monasticism that withdraws itself from any engagement with others. This path is in fact a conception of what we have come to think of as the private life that frees itself from the burden of public affairs, not out of any hatred of man or love of God, but in order to enter into a life of study and reading and writing surrounded by friends and devoid of the distracting passions engendered by the world. Petrarch asserts unequivocally in the solitary life that public life is incompatible with virtue. At the very heart of the claim is the conviction that social life is dominated by the opinions and values of the multitude, who are invariably slaves to their passions. Man in society is thus not a free being who seeks his own good, but a slave who desires the praise and fears the blame of others, and who consequently wants only what others want. Those engaged in public affairs, quote, are ruled by the power of another man's nod, and learn what they must do from another man's look. They claim nothing as their own. Their house, their sleep, their food is not their own. And what is even more serious, their mind is not their own. Their countenance not their own. They do not weep and laugh at the promptings of their own nature, but discard their emotions to put on those of another. In sum, they transact another man's business, think another man's thoughts, live by another man's gaze. The multitude thus merely follow one another, which is to say, they are dominated by the lowest desires, and thus the satisfaction of these desires into objects of praise. Turn satisfactions into objects of praise. Under such circumstances, virtue is impossible, and man necessarily becomes vicious, prey in envy, to resentment. The busy man's heart is wholly fixed on treachery, and he becomes pernicious, unstable, faithless, inconstant, fierce, and bloody. You only need to look at all the drama that happens in VTubing. So the intellectual life also disappears in the public sphere. For public life is devoted to the cultivation of estates and not minds. In fact, minds are deadened under such circumstances. For the mania for talk, noise, and disturbance, Petrarch admits that there are some saintly active men, such as Scipio, but he believes that they are very few, and that they are not happy. In his view, a noble spirit will never find repose save in God or in himself, and his private thoughts, or in some intellect ununited by a close sympathy with his own. It is only It is only in private life, only in what Petrarch calls solitude or retirement, that man can be true to himself and enjoy his own individuality. This idea is a fundamental departure from medieval tradition. Scholasticism had understood man not in his particularity and uniqueness, but as a species, as the rational animal. Human happiness for scholasticism consisted in actualizing one's natural potentialities and fulfilling one's supernatural. Excuse me, my throat's getting a little sore. Occam and the nominalist movement rejected this view, arguing that all beings are radically individual, created directly by God. Thus, there are no universals or species, and all supposed species are merely names or signs. Petrarch had similar doubts that humans could be understood as a species. In a letter to his brother, he argued that human inclinations conflict not only for man in general, but also for the individual. This I confess and cannot deny. I know myself and others as well, since I contemplate the human species in groups and singly. What in truth can I say about men, or who can enumerate the infinite differences which so mark mortals, that they seem to belong neither to a single species nor to a single type? This insight into the radical individuality of human beings shapes Petrarch's thought. We have already examined his attempts in the songbook and My Secret to portray himself as a particular individual with all his idiosyncrasies. Gustav Korting argues that this emphasis on personality marks a definite break with the Middle Ages. Eric Lewes suggests that Petrarch is a witness for a new understanding of the meaning of the individual as an irreplaceable personality. His own self-presentation in his written work is an example of the unfolding expression of character that Petrarch has in mind. To know how one ought to live, it is essential to know what one is. He thus does not seek to lay down a rule for others, but only to expose the principles of his own mind. His life appeals to him as supremely desirable, but he does not therefore recommend it for general imitation. It is crucial that each man decide according to his own preferences, for it is impossible that a single road should suit all men. Petrarch does not mean that everybody should simply follow his whims. Quote, each man must seriously take into account the disposition with which nature has endowed him, and the best which by habit or training he has developed. In the plan to reform our lives, we should be guided not by idle wishes, but by our character and predisposition. It is thus necessary for man to be particularly honest and exacting in passing judgment on himself, and to avoid temptation of eye and ear. This is only to say that each man should undergo the kind of self-examination undertaken in My Secret. Once one has come to the bottom of oneself and grasped one's peculiar nature, warts and all, he or she should follow the path that this nature demands. As Petrarch puts it, each person, whether saint, soldier, or philosopher, follows some irresistible call of his nature. In his view, however, we generally do not do this, because we are guided not by our own judgment, but by the opinions of the crowd. The distortion of judgment is the great danger that makes the private life or the life of solitude necessary. Independence of mind is only possible in solitude, in private, away from the crowd, away from politics. Only there is it possible to live according to your own pleasure, to go where you will, to stay where you will, to belong to oneself in all seasons, and wherever you are to be ever yourself, far from evil, far from the examples of wickedness. Is there any specific notes I should read here, I think? Petrarch in this case stands at the end of a long tradition of differing assessments of the proper relation of the vita activita and the vita contemplativa. It begins with Seneca and passes through Philo of Judea, Antony, Basil, Jerome, Augustine, Julius Pomerus, Gregory the Great, Isidore of Seville, Peter Damiani. On this point, okay, so there's a lot of names there. Importantly, this is not the case with the orator, who must constantly think of what his audience wants to hear. In solitude, Petrarch thus stakes out a claim for the superiority of philosophers to orators. They seek to know themselves and thereby to return the soul to itself, despising the empty glory sought by the orators. Excuse me. Petrarch in this case, is Scipio. Scipio did eventually retire, but he retired more so because he was pushed out, really. Petrarch's previous thought, and his later thoughts and remedies, clearly owes a great deal to Stoicism. The tremendous emphasis on virtue and the general denigration of pleasure is deeply indebted to Cicero and Seneca. The position that Petrarch lays out in the solitary life, however, owes at least as much to Epicurus. Petrarch even employs the famous Epicurean image of the tower to describe the relation that the wise man adopts towards the world. Is the unmoved mover? You're just adding more things about Scipio. This Epicurean ideal of withdrawal from society into the philosophic garden, however, is combined with the emphasis on moral autonomy and virtue drawn from Roman Stoicism. This notion of psychic and moral self-sufficiency, however, is not identical to the Stoic notion. Stoicism never recognized such a notion of radical individuality. For Stoicism, the supreme model for human life is the sage. Everyone has their duty commensurate with their place in society. Petrarch, however, sees the private man affirming and living in accordance with his own idiosyncratic being. Thus, not only does Petrarch value individuality, he asserts, as Zeitlin puts it, that we have a right to the expression of our individuality, the right to the human personality to express and realize itself according to its individual qualities, the right to a particular individual to regulate his life according to the disposition and humour with which nature has endowed him, and without which any reference to the claims of his fellow men upon him, Thus, Petrarch tells us that while he admires Cicero more than any other thinker, he does not imitate him, since he does not want to be an imitator of anyone. Petrarch wants to be himself and enjoy his own being, and the legitimation of this desire, Petrarch's protestations notwithstanding, owes more to Epicureanism than to Stoicism. Moreover, this notion of individuality has important implications for the realization of virtue that call into question Petrarch's attachment to Stoicism. First, it is fairly clear that virtue, as it is understood in this work, cannot be produced by political institutions or by a system of education or training, because each person's unique potentialities and the virtues pertaining to them can only be known by themselves, by a means of introspective self-examination. Second, for those who live within society, it is impossible to overcome their lower impulses, because they are constantly distracted from their own most goods, by the praise and blame of others. Thus, the immoderate desire for fame, that unresolved problem of my secret, can only be satiated by the withdrawal from active life and the proper use of leisure. Only in private will it be possible to win the war over our passions, to expel vice from our borders, put our lusts to flight, restrain our illicit propensities, chastise our wantonness, and elevate our minds towards higher objects. Quote, "Let some govern the populous city and others rule the army. Our city is that of our mind, our army that of our thoughts." That man would lose a war very quickly. Humans in this way remain political, but only because they become autarchic cities with laws and customs peculiar of their own. The solitude that Petrarch recommends is not a form of idleness, but of spiritual activity. Here again, Scipio serves as a model. Oh no, here we go again. Scipio, who claimed, quote, that he was never less idle than when at leisure, and never less lonely than when alone. As Petrarch puts it, "The holiday I ordained is for the body, not for the mind. I do not allow the intellect to lie fallow, except that it may revive and become more fertile by a period of rest. I not only entertain, but take pains to summon noble thoughts. This life is above all else devoted to study, with a view not to fame or a reputation for learning, but to self-improvement and self-perfection." Petrarch thus admits that he could not endure his solitude without reading. "Isolation without literature is exile, prison and torture. Supply literature, and it becomes your country, freedom and delight." He's so true. Not only is solitude conducive to reading, it also promotes composition. For literature can be carried on nowhere more successfully or freely than in solitude. Indeed, such leisure or freedom has always been the source of the crafts, of the arts. The solitary life is thus ideally suited to the modern human life, to the most truly human lives, those of the philosophers, the poet, the saint, and the prophet. A lot of the notes here are mainly just references to the various works and the quotes that they're providing. The goal of this life is to spend time in the content of the company of noble thoughts, inspiring books, and loving friends. The solitary life that Petrarch lauds is thus not an isolated life, like that of the monk or a hermit, but a private life lived among friends. No solitude is so profound, no house so small, no door so narrow, but it may open to a friend. Indeed, solitude for Petrarch is enriched by the presence of a friend. He even asserts that he would prefer to be deprived of solitude rather than his friends. The solitary life for Petrarch is not so solitary. In fact, it is much more a private fellowship of like-minded spirits. All of this again very reminiscent of Epicurus's garden. It is also deeply rooted in Petrarch's own life experience, for he worked very hard throughout his life to cultivate and maintain a large circle of friends. Friendship for Petrarch, however, always meant conversation, whether in person or in writing. Indeed, in this way, Petrarch could repeatedly refer to thinkers long dead as friends. They spoke to him through the books. The solitary life for Petrarch is thus not the silence of the Carthusian monastery which his brother chose, and which Petrarch praised in his religious leisure, but a continual conversation with friends through books and letters and in the imagination. Solitude for Petrarch is indeed something holy, innocent, incorruptible, and the purest of all human possessions. Therefore, whether our desire is to serve God, which is the only freedom and the only felicity, or by virtuous practices to develop our mind, which is the next best application of our labour, or through reflection and writing to leave our remembrance to posterity, and so arrest the flight of days and extend the all too brief duration of life, or whether it is our aim to achieve all these things together, let us, I pray you, make our escape at Lent and spend in solitude what little time remains. Petrarch clearly knows, however, that solitude is not for everyone. Indeed, the disposition of most men is not favourable to such a life. Petrarch claims that he will thus be happy if he can persuade a few to follow this path, and the rest simply to view solitude in a more friendly fashion. How many more pages do I have left? 1, 2, 3... kind of 4 pages. You know what, let's finish off those 4 pages. Between Adam and Prometheus. The question of human dignity was shaped from medieval Christianity by the nearly unanimous opinion that Adam's fall had cost man dearly. From this perspective, man had no intrinsic worth or dignity. He had once occupied an elevated position as the imago Dei, but lost it as a result of his original sin. Humans thus could only be redeemed from their fundamental sinfulness by divine grace. Astoundingly, the question of sin seldom arises for Petrarch. He certainly believes that we are often misguided by our various passions, but he seems equally certain that we can overcome them if we try. Here Petrarch is quite distant from his medieval predecessors. Public virtue, which in his view is generally a byproduct of the desire for fame, may be tainted by the corrupt desire for the praise of the mob, but private virtue, such as that described in the solitary life, is a product of an individual will that attains its dignity through self-mastery. The individual's dignity, however, is thus not a consequence of what he is, that is, the rational animal occupying the highest rung of creation, but what he does, or the fact that he employs his will to liberate himself from the mastery of his passions. What on the surface looks like the renunciation of the world in the solitary life is thus in reality an affirmation of human individuality that simultaneously sanctions the virtuous individual's enjoyment of his own being. While Petrarch does not thereby abandon Christianity, he does at least seem to adopt a quasi-Pelagian view that man renders himself worthy of salvation or damnation by his own actions. If man is capable of lifting himself, he has little practical need of divine grace. It is precisely on grounds such as these that J.H. Whitfield had suggested that Petrarch's thought leads to Epicureanism. He recognizes that Petrarch is generally quite critical of Epicurus, but believes that there is much the two have in common. Petrarch sees the summum bonum as unitas, in contrast to Epicurus's view that it is voluptas. I don't know what that means. But if virtue is always idiosyncratic to an individual's own being, then it does not differ from one's doing whatever gives one pleasure. Or to put it in other terms, unitas is indistinguishable in practice from voluptas. Let's see if they give an actual explanation of that. 153. A child refuses to sleep during night. A child refuses to sleep during nap time. Are they guilty of resisting arrest? Okay, that I have not heard that one before. I like that one. That's very good. That made me giggle. There doesn't seem to be a explanation of what those words mean, unfortunately. Petrarch, of course, wants to deny such a conclusion, but it is clear that possibility is present in Petrarch's thought. Whitfield quite plausibly suggests that modernity has subsequently never been wholly able to deny Epicurus his place. Whitfield admits that this turn to hedonism looks like a turn away from Petrarch, but he suggests it is rather a rejection of the negative elements in Petrarch's thought in the context of a broader affirmation of Petrarch's essentially Epicurean position. In contradistinction to the charge that Petrarch betrays man's humanity by denying his nature as a rational animal and the imago Dei, critics have accused him of vastly exaggerating human potentialities by attributing a superhuman power of the human will. Petrarch's notion of individuality seems particularly open to such a charge. He argues in the Remedies that God has demonstrated man's superiority over all other creatures. Indeed, in reflecting on Christ, he asserts that, so being made a man, he might make man a god. Does not this alone seem to ennoble somewhat the condition of the man, and to relieve a little of its misery? What more, pray, could man, I do not say hope for? What more, pray, could man, I do not say hope for, but aim at, and think of, than to be God? He did not assume any other body and soul than that of man, although he could have done so. In this way, Petrarch seems to magnify the capacities of the individual beyond human limits. Hello, Dia. Fine. Venus. I better not be waking people up. Venus. 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 Is that what you want me to say, Dia? Is that what you wanted me to say, Dia? Is that what you want me to say? Venus. You use your points. You actually use your points to say Venus. How dare you? You're gonna make me do push-ups. You're gonna make me do push-ups. Okay, I will do push-ups, but let me finish off the book, because it's already been taking enough time. Venus. Ye. Dia, oh my lord. Welcome in, Dia, welcome in. You know what? Let me do this real quick. Shout out. What the hell? OBS? Why am I not logged in? Never mind, that's fine. I will simply do it over here. What happens if I shout myself out? Okay, so I don't know why I'm not logged into Twitch, like, on chat. That's very strange, but maybe I just need to redo it. Anyway, let me get back into the book. While it is certainly the case that both of these charges can be plausibly levelled against Petrarch, I do not believe that either of them finally strikes at the core of his thought. Petrarch does not seek either to confine human being to the finite realm of mere matter and motion, or to promote a striving to challenge God, but pursues instead a middle course between Epicurus and Prometheus. He has a deep appreciation of the need for a sense of the eternal and eternal in human life, and is equally sure that man himself cannot supply or even ultimately comprehend it. Plotinus, according to Petrarch, recognized 4 kinds of virtue: political, purgatorial, purified, and godly virtue. The first are the virtue of a Caesar or a Scipio. The second are the virtues of those private men who become followers of philosophy and successfully eradicate the passions that are only moderated in the case of the former. Petrarch puts himself in this group. The third are the virtues of the Stoic age. As admirable as they may be, Petrarch doubts that any such human beings ever actually existed. And finally, the virtues of the fourth category pertain to God alone and are utterly beyond human beings. The highest form of a life possible for actual human beings, in Petrarch's view, is thus the life of a man who truly masters his passions by eliminating rather than merely moderating them. For Petrarch, such a life is only possible if it is led in private, to please oneself and not in public for the praise of the multitude. You can't shout yourself out. I see. That makes sense. The ability to succeed in such a life depends in good measure upon individual human capacities, and particularly the strength of one's will. But Petrarch never claims that such capacities are all that is needed. Without Christ and his help, he asserts, no one can become wise and good. Petrarch thus seems to reject Pelagianism. For Petrarch, God as the Trinity is the highest power, the highest wisdom, and the highest good. This claim tells us a great deal about Petrarch's theological views. Ancient thinkers such as Cicero, according to Petrarch, understood that the divine must be rational and good, but they did not and could not comprehend divine power, because they were unable to grasp the divine capacity for creatio ex nihilo. This was the great breakthrough that Christ and Christianity made possible. It is the crucial fact that Epicurus and his followers could not know. It is the crucial fact that, quote, Epicurus and his followers could not know, and our Aristotelian philosophers do not deign to know. Wait, where am I? Oh, they did not understand that the world is created through the world as an expression of the divine will. That is, that the articulation of the word creates the world because it is the expression of divine will and power. The ancients were unable to understand such a God because they continued to measure all gods by human capacities. Omnipotence, however, is not possible for man. Like the nominalists, Petrarch lays great emphasis on the omnipotence of the divine will and the radical separation of God and man. In contrast to the nominalists, however, Petrarch sees a God who is willful but not unsettling. For nominalism, the idea of an absolute divine power has a corollary divine unpredictability. For Petrarch, by contrast, God is the one, the good, the true, the stably abiding. As such, he is a lodestone for human beings. Human longing is boundless and insatiable until it comes to rest in thee, above whom there is no place to which it could not rise. In his omnipotence, such a God, in Petrarch's view, is both unreachable and yet infinitely lovable. Petrarch ties together this view of the divine and his role in human life and religion with his concern for virtue in his last treatise, quote, or named, of our own ignorance and that of many others. There's a long passage here. Though our ultimate goal does not lie in virtue, where the philosophers locate it, it is through the virtues that direct the ways lead to the place where it does lie. And these virtues, I must add, must be not merely known but loved. Therefore, the true moral philosophers and useful teachers of the virtues are those whose first and last intentions is to make hearer and reader good, those who do not merely teach what virtue and vice are, but sow into our hearts love of the best and eager desire for it, and at the same time hatred of the worst and how to flee it. It is safer to strive for a good and pious will than for a capable and clear intellect. The object of the will it is to be good, that of the intellect is truth. It is better the will be good than to know the truth. If this life is impossible to know God in his fullness, piously and ardently to love him is possible, as it is to know that virtue is the next best thing to God himself. When we know this, we shall love him for his own sake, with our hearts and marrows, and virtue we shall love for his sake too. On the surface, this view seems very pious, but it does not live up to Jesus' 2 commandments. Petrarch does not suggest that we follow divine commands, that we love our nature, or that we lead a life of poverty and ascetic denial. Still, he does not fall into either an Epicureanism or Stoicism that is centered completely on man. He continues to praise the classical life of virtue, the value of friends, and the necessity of leisure, but he praises them not in their own right, because it is pleasing to God and it is the road toward immortality. The highest Christian possibility for Petrarch thus looks remarkably like the philosopher, like the life of the philosophic sage, and decidedly unlike that of the saint or the martyr. Petrarch mentions the example of Socrates only rarely, but it is clearly something like the life of Socrates that he has in mind. Thus, in his view, we come to understand our duty not through scripture or the works of the fathers, but through an introspective self-examination. Conscience, Petrarch tells us, is the best judge of virtue. It is the witness that tells us what is right. Coming to terms with his voice may include the reading of scripture, along with Cicero, Seneca, et al., but it ultimately depends upon the kind of critical examination Petrarch undertook in My Secret, and the withdrawal from public life that he described in The Solitary Life. Petrarch thus neither sets man up to rival God, nor deprives man of God. Rather, he seeks to combine Christianity with a notion of virtue he finds in Cicero and Seneca. All of this is enclosed within a notion of individuality that is prefigured in, if not derived from, nominalism. To put the matter more generally, Petrarch seeks a synthesis of Augustinianism that emphasizes man's dependence on his creator, with a Stoicism that emphasizes his independence. These two positions, however, seem on the surface to be contradictory. The concept of individuality that he deploys is intended to resolve this contradiction. These two can be held together within the individual if the individual is properly and extensively educated, chooses to live a private rather than a public life, has the wherewithal to live a life of leisure, has the will to master his passions, is able to surround himself with true friends. The good life for Petrarch is thus possible only for exceptional individuals. Consequently, there is unquestionably a fundamental elitism to Petrarch's position. Late in life, Petrarch remarked that he aimed to combine Platonic wisdom, Christian dogma, and Ciceronian eloquence. This was, of course, a titanic task, and he realized he had not been able to complete it. His magnificent example was a beginning that inspired successive generations of humanists to follow this path. It is an examination of this humanist project that we will now turn. And that leads us into Chapter 3, Humanism and the Apotheosis of Man. But we're going to leave that chapter there, because I've already been reading for a little while. I'm glad I got that chapter done, though, when everything was going wrong on OBS, and I was not having a very fun time. I was worried that was it, that I was going to be not reading today, but in the end it worked out. So, I have one last thing to do, and that's I had to fill up my bottle of water after this, but hang on, let me get this out. Okay, I just don't want it to make too much noise for you guys. How does that always happen? How does that microphone? I guess I'm moving things around. So we'll do some late night push-ups, I suppose. Do a little bit of stretching. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. There we go. 30 push-ups. That seems like a fair amount for a slight delay. Okay, so So I, I really hate when my chair, when I sit down on it and it kind of drops a little bit. Sometimes it drops right down. I'm always worried that, because I learned that chairs like these can explode if they're poorly built or like something gives. I'm always worried that like it's gonna drop and it's gonna go bang. What? Yeah, last lot. I want you to go onto YouTube and type in exploding like chairs or like exploding office chairs or something like that. Exploding gaming chair. Yeah. So how sitting on a gaming chair tragically killed a 14-year-old. How sitting on a gaming chair tragically killed. That should get you the video that I watched. Your chair broke on stream? No, Daya. Oh no, that sucks. Please get a high quality one. A well built one. Like for one that has like signs of quality. You've been sitting on a plastic chair for months now. It's probably safer, to be honest. As long as it has decent support. Like honestly, I would say don't get a gaming chair. Gaming chairs actually, for the most part, suck. Cheerful looking cartoon. I would recommend like an office chair. Look into office chairs because they tend to be a lot more ergonomic. Much better suited. While gaming chairs are meant to resemble like racing car seats, it's much better to go for like a properly well made office chair that has good support and adjustable. If you can, go for the ones with like adjustable armrests, both in and up. Those are pretty good. But let me hello McLaren, welcome in. We've just finished up the reading, I suppose. We've just finished up the reading. But welcome in. Thank you so much for the first time chat. Welcome in. Okay, so so Anna Frikova and Bobby Duck were also first time chatters. I knew they were, but it wasn't coming up on my stream chat doc. What's going on? Why am I not signed into Steam? What the hell? Maybe I just have to sign in again for some strange reason. But hello. Welcome in. Sorry, I was having some problems with my OBS, my streaming software, earlier today. Thankfully, it seems to be at least fixed now. Let me put down that book there. Your voice be calming. Thank you so much, McLaren. I like to do a lot of reading streams, and people often tell me that I do have a relaxing voice, but I find it's difficult for me to find time to do ASMR. It can just be loud around my house. Or my forest, I should say. Well, my house. The forest is my house, of course. It can just be awkward, but I'm glad you find my voice relaxing. I'm glad you can. I like to always hope that people can just kind of like have me on in the background and I keep them nice and cozy, or they fall asleep. It is very nice ASMR. Maybe, but then sometimes I just go off on a ramble. I just talk away. You may do that. You may go for eep. Go for a nice cozy eep. I do like thinking that people are going eep, though, to my voice that is helping them fall asleep. I do want to get back into trying proper ASMR, though. You know, I have things like the water globes. I have the Treadio. I have the tuning forks. Sleep does sound ideal. Sleep is always good, and you know what? I think you guys can tell from my own little yawn there that I'm feeling the eepiness myself. Right, I don't know what's coming on. There we go. It's like the more I think about it, the eepier I get. think time for eep. Go get under the blanket and go eepy. The missile is very eepy. The missile is eepy. He is eepy. He is very tired. The missile has had a long day of splashing bandits and wants to take a small sleep. He eeby and neebies a sleepy. Missile sleepy and needs bed by time. The missile is currently experiencing critical levels of being a sleepy little guy and needs to go beb. He is retired and needs to sleep. Just a little sleeping time is a treat. Miss Lily needs to sleep for tweered boyo. Just a little guy. Okay, I'm done. I can't talk like that. Good night, mysterious man of camming. Well, so that I may not be such a mysterious man of camming. My name is Ruadh. I am a half-human, half-Tuatha, which is a descendant of the god peoples of Ireland who inhabited this island before the Gaels arrived. They were the second last group of people described in the Book of Invasions. But it was a pleasure to meet you, McLaren. And good night, and have a wonderful sleep. Now, I think I may myself raid into someone, and I'm sure we can find someone great to raid. Who is currently around? Hane TV. I haven't heard of this person before. Is she eeping? I think she's sleeping at the moment. She's doing a 24-hour. I knew you were a brother of Ireland. So are you. I was assuming possibly Ireland or Scotland by the name McLaren. But yes, I am from Ireland. I am Irish, and I've met a couple of people here, so it's very cool to see another person. Any of my friends doing ASMR at the moment? I already raided into him recently. I don't want to raid into anyone who is that's karaoke. I have to do a karaoke stream soon, seriously. I really need to do a karaoke stream soon. At least a Christmas one, but I'd like to do one before Christmas. What's Okay. Magino seems to be having Raid the Monkey ASMR. No, not the monkey. I know which one you're on about. I don't want to raid the monkey ASMR. I find that one weird, personally. There's the guy who's counting to 1,000,000, and I kind of want to raid him because I think that would be funny. I don't think there's anyone in my immediate circle that's doing ASMR, and the only other ASMRs that I see are kind of iffy. Wow, that's big jiggle physics. I'm just saying right now, there's a lady here that we could raid into, who's doing ASMR. She has nice whispers, but I don't want to send you guys over to something who, wait. Ray does not do GFE style ASMR triggers such as kissing or ear licks. Ray is still new to ASMR streams. Please be kind and Okay, yes, we are rating this woman, even if she may be very jiggly in certain places. It's a very pretty model, though. I love the Easter, not Easter. What the fuck am I talking about? The Christmas antlers she has. That's a very cute asset. I kind of want those. I want these. I'm gonna message her afterwards. Be like, where did you get these? I want them. Does she have a Christmas jumper too, or is that just her normal? Does she have a Christmas tree tattoo? That's kind of cool. She's a lot of cool things. You know, I think we're gonna raid this woman, Just Aurelia. I think we'll go say hi to her. I think it will be fun. In dedication to the Christmas spirit, it's pretty based, I have to say. I think for some reason my OBS stream is not logged into my Twitch. I'm going to have to remedy that. Hopefully it's not too much of a hassle. Would have thought that being connected to my stream would have been fine, but it is what it is anyway. Thank all of you for joining me today. It was a bit of a stressful day, I must say, both in annoyance and not so. I hope to do a lot more streaming over the coming weeks, because I will be a lot more free. So I might try and do more modern, not modern, what? I might try and do more kind of like midday streams, maybe even early morning, maybe even late night streams. Like I'll stream kind of earlier in the day and then stream like middle of the night. Well, it's already past middle of the night, so like more like close to morning streams. Like 6 o'clock. What if I did like a 6 o'clock ASMR stream for like people in America? Or something like that anyway. I could do silly things like that. But anyway, guys, great mila and slán go fóill, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.